Today's learning objectives is to gain insight on the evolving role of financial operations, learn how organizations are evaluating technology, harnessing the power of clean data, and the future skills required of finance professionals. Learn about some of the specific features and functionality of Tesorio software. And now I will hand you over to Brian.
Great. Thanks, Maroa. And thanks, everyone, for being here. Yeah, I'm excited about this session today. I do a lot of webcasts, and many times I'm all alone, but it's great that I'm going to be joined by two individuals that I'll introduce in a minute. But what we're going to do is we're going to have really a panel discussion. We're going to share some insights, but really have a robust discussion on the topics of the rise in financial operations role, how the roles are changing between traditional finance and financial operations, technology and data, how those go hand in hand, point solutions versus ERP platforms. And then, of course, we can't forget that people are still a critical asset to our organizations. We'll have polling questions throughout, and we'll also be monitoring for Q&A. We'll have some time at the end, but as questions come up during it, please put those in the chat or the Q&A. We'll be looking for that. Okay. So today, joined with me is Carlos Vega, who's the CEO and co-founder at Tesorio, Katie Kahn, who's the Senior Director of Finance Operations. That's going to be the key thing we're talking about at Bazaarvoice. So I'm going to let them both do an introduction. Why don't we start with Katie and then Carlos?
Thanks, Brian, and thanks so much for having me here today. As Brian said, my name is Katie Kuhn, and I lead the finance operations group for Bazaarvoice and have been with the company for over 12 years. Starting off, I'll ask for your understanding today. I'm a little under the weather, and so I may occasionally be off camera or might need to pause when speaking. So Bazaarvoice is a privately held global software as a service company based out of Austin, Texas, with revenue of approximately $500 million. The company is a leading provider of product reviews and user-generated content. And what Bazaarvoice does is enables brands and retailers worldwide to harness the power of product reviews and other user-generated content, such as photos, videos, or social media content, to grow and improve their digital commerce offerings. So our SaaS platform enables customers to collect, moderate, curate, and distribute this content across the e-commerce landscape, including to our network of retailers, about 1,700 worldwide. We work with some of the largest brands and retailers in the world. And for this audience, some great examples: Procter & Gamble, 3M, Unilever, Target, and Walmart, and L'Oreal are some of our customers. So making it more tangible with an example, Primal Kitchen is a consumer packaged goods brand. If you haven't heard of them, they make great salad dressing, sauces, oils, condiments, and they collect reviews on their products on their website. But those reviews also flow to Target, a large retailer. And so that review on their site also flows to Target and gets more eyes on it. But alongside the photos of their product on the Target page, we're also pulling in social media content where real consumers have used those packaged goods, those salad dressings, to make dishes that then appear photos, that social media content alongside on the Target page. So really helping amplify the voice and convert those views on a page to purchases. So that's a little bit about Bazaarvoice. And now I will pass it to Carlos. And thanks again, Brian, for having me.
Great. Thanks, Katie. Carlos, how about you?
Yeah, excellent. Thanks for having me, Brian. Glad to be here with you again. So Carlos Vega, co-founder and CEO of Tesorio. So I spent about a decade in finance at General Motors and at Lazard doing investment banking as well before starting the company after having gone to business school. And so, genesis of the company, I used to have a factoring business on the side while I was doing investment banking. If you can imagine having a side gig as an M&A banker, but it was pretty interesting. I was kind of let down. Our whole strategy was to, help people with their short-term working capital needs by giving them factoring and then help them graduate to a banking relationship. Most people said, like, it's okay, just give me the money. Like, that's fine. Like, I don't need a line of credit or anything. Like, this is fine. My margins are healthy enough. I'm good. And I really didn't like it. I'm not saying factoring doesn't have a place in the world, but the way it felt to me was payday lending for business. And mainly people making not great decisions because they didn't understand cash flow. And so when I went to Wharton, I focused on how do I start a company that will help people understand cash flow and then take the actions to redirect it or manage it to where they need it to go. That's the genesis of Tesorio. What we do today, in short summary, is automate the financial operations of companies, everything after close one through to cash application. So submitting an invoice into a portal, making sure you send smart collections campaigns to your customers, management across AR teams, sales teams, account management teams, everyone that's customer facing, to make sure you turn revenue into cash. And then receiving the payments and then reconciling the payments, all of that automated in one single workflow, one platform. And that's been a differentiator, because what we found out, and is the core of what we believe, is that cash flow is actually more of a data problem than a finance problem. So if you have all of these actions in a single workflow, you have the data flow as well, and all of that can inform the most unpredictable part of your cash, which is when you're going to get paid. Every penny going out the door, you control it, right? You make payroll, you make rent, you pay the vendors, you release the checks, you release the money, but when someone releases money to you is only something you can influence, right? So if you can get that under control and understand it and get all the data from all these different platforms, all these communications, it's unstructured today, and we'll talk about it more later, how AI can help structure unstructured data and all of that. Then you can get visibility into your AR. If you get visibility into your collections, usually the rest of your direct method forecast takes care of itself. So that's a little bit of the company. Obviously, we'll share more as we go through about the technology, vision, and all of that. But again, Brian, excited to be here. Katie, I always learn from you, so excited to listen in as well.
All right, great. Well, we're going to kick it off right away to find out who else is on with us today and what their roles are. So we're going to do our first polling question. What best describes your role? And so you have choices here: CFO, VP of Finance, Controller. If there is something that you do that's not on our list, please throw it in the chat so we know. But Marella, I see you have it up. We'll take just a few seconds and let us know what your role is.
I see lots of participation, Brian, so I'm just going to leave it open for a short while.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. This is always important, Carlos and Katie. It's like what they say when you're boarding the plane and it says, you're going to New York. If you're not, going to New York, you might want to get off now, right? So hopefully we have a lot of finance people on the line today is what I'm predicting.
Still lots of participation.
Christmas movies. Yeah, one of my favorite Christmas movies started that way with Home Alone too. So
there you go. Exactly.
Sharing results now.
Okay, really good mix there. We do have some others, but so we'll look at that as we go. But yeah, a great mix of people in the finance area, and roles and responsibilities are evolving. It's not as easy as it used to be, where your business card said I'm a manager in finance, and everyone kind of got that. Personally, I always said, well, what does that mean? What do you actually do? So we're going to get into what everyone actually does today in our conversation. So let's start in the first area, the rise of financial operations role. I mean, we're seeing more job postings and people being promoted into these types of roles. Shared services is a place where we're seeing a lot of it. That used to be a place where, traditional shared services was consolidate people, cost savings. It's really evolved now with technology. It's more organization than location for shared services. Katie, you're in this seat. Maybe you can help us understand your path to financial operations, what it is from your perspective, and why is the role so important today?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really passionate on this, as I should be. So my journey started out as the stereotypical accounting path. I got my master's in accounting, got my CPA, and started my career in public accounting as a financial auditor. After a few years there, I just knew my goal in life wasn't to be a partner. And I wanted to do what I say was less debits and credits. And so after my time in public accounting, I joined Bazaarvoice as part of a small team that was equal parts order management, contract advisory, and revenue accounting. But over time, as Bazaarvoice grew and our finance department grew, my role and how we structured finance changed. And so for about half my career with Bazaarvoice, I remained in a hybrid role of operations and accounting. So before my current position, last overseeing accounts receivable, finance operations, which is order management, billing operations, owns the software, our SaaS bookings policy, and revenue accounting, and led the implementation and adoption of ASC 606. After that milestone, my CFO, our controller, and I restructured the finance group. And that's how I moved into my current official finance operations role. So we moved revenue accounting under the controller. So now the controller had, main primary ownership for almost everything on the balance sheet and income statement. And then my role evolved to be deal desk. So our team that is responsible for collaborating with sales on custom contracts, maintained finance operations, and accounts receivable. So the quote to cash process. And most recently, we added commissions under my purview. So what I'm responsible for is how we craft custom deals, how we then book and bill those deals, how we, as our voice, get paid on those deals, and in turn, how we're paying our internal people, our sales teams, our services, and provisioning teams on deals. And while we are operationally focused, I still have my eye to that revenue accounting background to make sure that our contracts are compliant with accounting principles. They're not going to be a problem come when our third-party auditors come in at the end of the year, that we can take revenue on them. We don't have anything blocking revenue or holding up revenue or preventing or having trouble with collections. And so stepping back, the way I think about finance operations more broadly is it's been long understood that your chief sales officer, chief revenue officer have their right-hand person, which is their head of revenue or sales operations. But now the finance operations leader is becoming that right hand of the CFO. And so it's this unique skill set that's this combination. It's still leveraging key accounting competencies to ensure that our functions are financially compliant. But on the other side, we're focused on operational process, end-to-end process. How does it streamline? How are we being operationally efficient and excellent? And my leaders are constantly thinking about systems, data, processes, and integrations, but as well as the user experience. Like I think about how sales is interacting with us and in our tools, and also our customers. How is their experience with us on collections? And so I think that higher level process thinking and internal customer focus is where it diverges from that typical accounting background. So to me, that's the real magic in finance operations. You have one group thinking through the best, most efficient end-to-end process while maintaining financial compliance. And so that consolidation of these groups under a single organization allows for decision efficiency, and also we just move faster having one group with the end-to-end process. So that's my view of where I think we really add value to our CFO and the organization overall.
Yeah, no, that was really good the way you explained that, Katie. And again, as I was thinking through what you're saying, from quote to cash. So, those traditional roles that we would call operations in sales or order management, everything to get to where an invoice is created and now you want to collect it and get the cash. it's an end-to-end process and it's all financially impacted. So it makes great sense. And Carlos, are you also seeing a rise in this type of role with your clients and prospects that work with Tesorio?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, interestingly enough, Katie was one of the first I met that had the title. And since I met her, it kind of, I don't know if it's like Baader-Meinhof effect or what, but I started seeing it everywhere, right? At Shutterstock, there's a VP of financial operations, right? And in almost every company now, I'm seeing financial operations leaders. I know, Brian, like Hackett Group has a bunch of experience with global shared services and the global 2000, and it's interesting as I've learned more about what those guys have been doing for the last 20 years. There's a lot of that knowledge that I feel translates to what's happening right now in the middle market and emerging enterprise and this role of financial operations. And what it boils down to, that at least what I'm seeing, is that there are so many different processes, as you were just saying, that impact each of the workflows in finance and accounting. Katie, you said earlier, debits and credits, right? Like, we used to joke that finance and accounting was a department of no surprises, right? Like, keep everything working. You can only get a C+ at best, right? You can never get an A. You only hear from us if like things go wrong, but other than that, like, who cares, right? And that's completely changed, right? It's actually quite the opposite. And so folks are seeing like, hold up, there's all these workflows that actually go into running the business that they are owned by finance, and they've kind of been in the dark. And guess what? Like, being an accountant is very important in making sure the debits and credits actually do matter. Anyone who's been through an audit knows that. But that is also different from the running the business part of it, right? And that's where I think that changes happen, right? And financial operations folks, interestingly, what I'm seeing are folks like Katie, folks that were a VP of finance in the past. They were a controller, a senior accounting manager. And they said, hey, look, I understand the importance of all this, but I actually like getting my hands dirty and seeing how the systems talk to each other, how the data flows. Like, why is the sales team, we have to claw back their commissions. Why are they not being looped in earlier to help make sure we collect the cash so that we don't have to claw back their commissions? Because frankly, that's an annoying conversation to have. And it's something I really don't want to do. I'm only doing it because they didn't do what they were supposed to, right? And so those are the things that, financial operations leaders are doing. And so what are we seeing? Frankly, like, these folks are like a secret weapon. Like, I wasn't kidding before. I bet you if Ken at Bazaarvoice like moves like I'm not, sorry, I shouldn't bet this or suggest this in any way, but I bet you Katie would be his first call is like, I'm moving, you're coming with me. Like, and these are the types of things that we're seeing, is that when you have this partnership, it's very akin to like the CRO and RevOps relationship, right? Where a CRO moves, the RevOps person is with them, because a good CRO can't do their job without their RevOps leader, right? And it just makes sense, right? You mentioned order to cash. If you think about it, after close one in Salesforce, like, it's almost like, hey, you take care of closing the customers, we'll take care of business, right? Now you have to create the invoice, you have to send the invoice, you have to make sure you get paid, you have to receive the payment, reconcile it, all this sort of stuff. Today, these are baton handoffs from one person to another system, all this sort of stuff. And hey, what if that was all streamlined and one person oversaw it all, right? I think, Katie, we were talking about it, you might even be overseeing deal desk soon, if I'm not mistaken, right? Or you do already, I don't remember.
I have been. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's where it's even going like further up, right? And so like, I think that's what you'll expect to see is like, hold up, this is one work stream. Forget the idea of departments, right? The same way AI is creating opportunities for software to be more headless, right? And focus on workflows. I think you'll see AI breaking down some of these silos. And historically it was like, here's a department of sales, here's a department of finance. No, hold up. What is the work stream here for the customer? And let's think about the stakeholders as a customer.
It's not about departments, it's about end-to-end processes.
It's about the stakeholders.
What is your role in those end-to-end process, right?
With a stakeholder view, right? So exactly. Yeah.
Well, let's
so
hope
the customer's a stakeholder here. So
let's hope Katie's phone doesn't ring during this webcast, because we need to finish it. Okay.
I will talk Katie up all day. She opened my eyes to this. So yeah.
Well, good. Well, the changing role of finance and finance operations. Let's talk about this a little bit. well, let's do a polling question, and then I'm going to share some information from Hackett's key issues. What is your biggest challenge in financial operations today? So a lot of, as you're answering this question, think about it from, what both Katie and Carlos have shared here. What are your challenges? Lack of real-time visibility into your cash flow. Are you still siloed from a data and having disconnected systems? So just, take a quick look at this, and we're giving you an easy out. If you look at all the options, you say, I'm challenged with all this, you have an all of the above option. I think a big piece of it is that this is evolving, and probably evolving pretty quickly. So for some, it may be, how do we handle the change? How do we become agile and be competitive in a world that's moving fast, away from departments, end-to-end processes, and now, how does technology further enable and allow us to exploit the way the technology can make us faster, smarter, quicker, right? You have a prediction on this one, Carlos?
Reliance on outdated
biggest one?
processes, slow collections. I'm going to guess siloed data and disconnected systems.
Data is a big challenge for everybody, but how's it looking, Marella?
Good. Let me just,
Okay.
can you still see the poll?
We can, it's still up, yeah.
And by the way, related to that is why I think the folks running finance operations are former finance and accounting leaders themselves. We can talk about that in a second.
Sharing results.
Okay, yeah,
Close.
a lot of all the above, but yeah, among just the single answers, that siloed data and disconnected systems is, clearly a big challenge for everyone. I wasn't surprised at that one. So let's talk a little bit about technology now. Carlos, you've touched on it. Technology obviously plays a huge role in financial operations. Since you're kind of right there on the cutting edge, developing technology for finance teams, how do you think about giving finance teams access to new technology? I mean, I know it can be complicated, exciting, scary all at the same time. So what are you seeing as you're working with clients and bringing this new technology to help them enhance and excel in their work?
Yeah. So the reason I picked that as my guess when you asked me actually is because as a solution provider, I think enterprise software is under fire. I think the way that we're going to have to evolve and the technology we develop is going to be completely different from whatever we've done over the last 20 years. I think all the competitive moats that we've relied on over the last 20 years, like your UI being a little bit better and all this sort of stuff, like all of that's dead. And at the core of everything going forward is data. But, I say something to the team internally, and it relates back to finance operations. Like I say, hey, data might be the new oil, but remember, petroleum's pretty useless. And you got to do something with it, right? And the way that ties to data is that, like, data for data's sake, if it's not properly transformed for the objective you have with it, is also useless, right? So an example, Clary is another one of our customers. They help you forecast your revenue and your sales. We also ingest Salesforce data, right? The way Clary is going to use a Salesforce pipeline to forecast revenue is going to be transformed very differently than the way you would transform a Salesforce pipeline in order to forecast collections, right? Like in collections, you have to somehow figure out, hey, is it monthly, annual, quarterly billing? Like, what are the net terms? Like, what are the start dates? All this other, what are their patterns for payment? All these other things that you have to make assumptions around. So you have to transform the data differently, and that requires domain expertise. And that's why, again, I think you see finance operations leaders having this background, because they understand not just, oh yeah, I need pipeline data, but they know how to transform it. And that's just one example of data. There's all sorts of other complexities and data needed. And so where I'm going with this, the most obvious technology right now is AI, right? That is going to reshape the landscape. That's why that is the instigator behind me saying that those moats are dead. But AI doesn't work without good data, right? And so at the end of the day, that's why I think everyone is focused on this. It's where we have our largest engineering team is the integrations team, right? And that's where we have a lot of the focus. And so in order to help our customers, I think there's a couple of things we consider. There's three main ways we see AI helping. One is taking unstructured data and structuring it. So we call it primary source data, but it's data that before was not usable in any database way or any way that was actionable, like information in an email, information in a PDF or a signed contract, or information, in an image you got from the bank on a check, like you had to OCR it or whatever, fine, but that's pretty unreliable. But like basically taking all that unstructured data and structuring it. The other really important part is with that information, you can actually clean and enhance existing data. So add metadata or like make your existing databases better by adding information. For example, if you're going to do cash application, like, yeah, sure, you can get like a BAI file from your bank, but hey, what if now you can read through all of the emails that you're getting from your customers, all the attachments in their emails, right? Like the lockbox images that the bank might be able to send you. Well, they do sell you as well, but send you. And so like all that information to enhance like a traditional data source like BAI. And then the last point is like being able to look at granular data, right? And so being able to, for example, I want to predict collections, I could take my DSO, fine, or I could use machine learning, caveat, not AI in this example, machine learning, and go back and look at every single transaction I have had with every single customer and look at every single open invoice and basically have a customized little model for each customer that is predicting each of their open invoices based on how late they are and a bunch of different attributes to then predict the probable payment date in a bottoms-up way, granularly, invoice by invoice, and sum that up. That would be a pain to do manually, right? Mm-hmm. So like again, structuring unstructured data, cleaning up and enhancing existing data sources, and then granular analysis to like really be able to garner important insights. All of this, the power of that granularity is that it's actionable. Let's say you look at a collections forecast. It's like, oh, why did I miss? You can go back and see exactly what invoice did I predict to get paid this quarter that didn't, what got paid that I did not predict, all that sort of information, right? And I want to take action. Oh, we're going the wrong way. Hold up. What are the invoices that I'm expecting to come in that haven't come in yet? Let me send them an email or remind them to pay me automatically at the click of a button, right? Like, so that's my point, right? Like doing all these things makes the information actionable, and then you can use AI to make all those steps I just talked about almost automated. But that's just one example, deep dive on one use case, but imagine all of these different workflows and work streams. It's pretty exciting, and you have to just rethink everything.
If we make a simple analogy that, technology and AI is your engine, right? It's your automobile. You're not going to go anywhere if the tank is empty, right? So the data is the fuel.
Right.
Now, if you put dirty fuel or the wrong fuel in, your engine's not going to run right?
Yeah.
So it's the same kind of analogy. So Katie, why did you and your CFO, your leadership team, start looking into technology-infused solutions that has AI in it?
Yeah, about a year and a half ago, our CEO put out a company-wide initiative to evaluate how AI could improve our processes, our business, and make us more efficient. And that journey is actually what led us to Tesorio. For context, the biggest challenge I was trying to solve in accounts receivable was scale. About 50% of the number of invoices we send comprise only 10% of the dollars that we invoice. So large volume, low dollars. And I would be a terrible ops leader if I tried to solve that scale problem with headcount. And all of us being in finance, we know that we're probably not going to be widely approved to add more headcount. So how do we work smarter? What can systems do for us? And this was at the time that Gen AI was everywhere. You couldn't help but read about it and hear about it. And so with this AI challenge, my CFO and I couldn't stop thinking that there just had to be applications and benefits for accounts receivable and collections from AI. How can AI make us more efficient and solve this scale problem? Who is out there innovating in AI? And I literally started with a Google search about it and spent some time on G2, and Tesorio popped up as heavily investing in AI as part of their tool. But then once I started looking into Tesorio's functionality for what Carlos just walked through, it's not just about Gen AI, but also how can you do things with a click of a button that hits a broad group of customers who have missed their promise to pay date. And so it was this combination of AI, but then also thinking about, hey, what tools are out there to make my team more efficient and better at their jobs that also helps my scale problem. So that was really how it started for us.
Excellent, excellent. So I'm going to share a little bit of information here from the Hackett Group from our key issues study. We do this on an annual basis and try to get, an understanding of the direction of leaders in organizations. This is showing where, finance is aligned to support the business. So again, more and more, yes, we call them finance, but it's more evolving to what you've been talking about, Katie. It's financial operations, and it's looking at, business performance under that category, optimizing cash flow. We've talked about that several times here. Under transformation technology, they're looking at how they can modernize their technology landscape. So a little bit about, similar to the conversation you had with your leadership to say, okay, how can we take this to the next level? Implementing intelligent automation. So intelligent automation, Gen AI is one of the arrows in that quiver, along with machine learning that we've talked about, predictive AI, which, for the past 2 years, lots of people have been trying to understand, well, what's Gen AI? What was AI before Gen AI? And so many people were saying, well, we use AI today, and it's more that predictive type of AI. Gen AI obviously creating new things, doing things that people used to have to create manually. It's being created. The other area in core finance that's highlighted here is improved data, and we've been chatting about that. The data is so critical for AI empowered tools to be effective. And again, we're going to talk a little bit later in a few minutes about talent. So important. So improving the talent development and upskilling so your team can actually take advantage of the tools, and more importantly, interpret what is the information telling me, and how can I take that information to improve our strategy, grow our business. The other interesting thing is about cash flow and working capital. I went back just 2 years here. If I had gone back 5 years, you would have seen that optimized working capital and looking at cash flow just made it onto the list as number 10 in 2001. In 2002, it moved up to number 7 and held there in 2003 or 2023. Last year, moved up to number 2. And I'm excited because I'm always looking at working capital and helping our clients understand managing receivables and payables. It's the number one objective for finance organizations to be looking at their cash flow and optimizing their cash flow performance. So that makes me pretty excited. When we think about how they're doing it with tools. And when we talk specifically about Gen AI, and in a minute, Carlos, I'm going to ask you about how do you separate the hype from the true opportunities. But this is highlighting that it's being looked at a lot. Predictive analytics and machine learning organizations are in stages of exploring. Same thing with Gen AI, but there's big opportunities. I mean, there's still some on the sidelines, right? Just a little bit less than a quarter each. We're not doing anything yet. So big opportunities. My concern with them is the ones that aren't doing anything and they're watching to see what happened. I don't know that they're ever really going to catch up. It's similar to, if you think about, we talked about shared services now. I don't think there's anywhere in the world where there's a secret source of low cost employment, right? We've searched the world. There's no more. And so there's no opportunity today to harness that. I think you're going to see the same thing with organizations that don't take advantage of AI and Gen AI tools today. So let's do a polling question, and then Carlos, we'll go back and really dig in a little more into myth and reality with AI. But let's get some answers from who's on today, similar to what I just shared. So Morella, if you could bring it up, we'd like to know how your organization, your finance team, is currently using AI. And similar to what I shared from our study, are you actively leveraging it today? Are you experimenting, maybe just exploring, but you haven't done anything? Not using it? And I wanted to put one in there. Maybe people are still skeptical. I know 2 years ago people were like, this just says, this sounds more like something I've seen on TV, but now we're seeing it in everyday lives. So Katie, Carlos, what do you think is going to be the most popular choice on this one?
We still have participation.
Okay.
I would say exploring, but not implemented.
I would say the same. That was my guess.
Okay.
Brian, I wanted to highlight something you said. I mean, some of these stats are probably already known, but you mentioned a second ago about like the gap widening, about people who aren't doing this sort of thing. I mean, to go back a little bit further back, McKinsey has like put this out there that like the lifespan of a Fortune 500 company has decreased 70% over the last 60 years, right? So like velocity and refreshing of like who's growing fast and who's succeeding has continued to accelerate. And the other one, I don't know if you saw Tomas Tungus, he highlighted recently that the revenue per employee of some of the newer companies popping up is over $1 million per FTE. I mean, that blows my mind. I mean,
yeah,
just 2 years ago, like that's 3 to 5x like above what was considered amazing, like just, in 2023, which is crazy to me. Like running a company that's smaller in the tech space, I'm like, man, that's way better than where we're at, and I thought we were doing a good job. So the folks coming up, I mean, it's kind of using that as like a canary in a coal mine a little bit to know what's happening with smaller companies. That's going to go up, right? For everyone. It's kind of interesting to see.
Yeah, and one of our participants today made a good point around this question in general. Is we should have separated predictive machine learning AI from Gen AI, which is a great point, because hopefully everyone's using some element of AI today, but really, the next generation is that generative AI, where it's actually, taking structured, unstructured information and creating something that's net new, right? And that's helpful. So that was a good point. Thanks for putting that in there. There's a couple of people that also have questions. Morel is letting me know that some hands are raised. So were you able to put those questions into the Q&A? I think the chat is not working, if I understand right. Morella, can you verify that?
Yeah, I've got the Q&A window open, so anything that comes in there.
Yeah, we're looking for it, but
Yes,
Yeah,
the
Rich-
Q&A. The Q&A is the one that's working.
right. Yeah, so if you have raised your hand, please go into that Q&A and put your question in there. We'll make sure we address it, okay? So let's talk a little bit now about point solutions versus ERP platforms. Carlos, you and I have talked about this in the past, that before there was an ERP, everyone had different tools, applications, and it was, I think everyone has at some point in their career seen the spaghetti chart of, this is how we get things done. And on the whiteboard, there's, arrows and lines going to all around. And the promise of ERPs was going to be, you can erase that board and it's going to be one system, does it all for you.
Yeah.
I don't believe that promise ever really came to fruition. And what I see more and more is, yes, everyone has an ERP, but really to be fully effective in what we're talking about today with these end-to-end financial operations types of roles, you're having to plug, I don't want to say plug the hole, you're having to bring in tools and technology that are just above and beyond what the ERP can do. That's really what I'm seeing. And why don't we start with Katie on this one? Let me get your thoughts and opinion in terms of ERP. It can do so much, but it's not giving us everything we need. What from your perspective and in your experience, how do you see point solutions versus ERP platforms?
I think you summarized it really well, Brian. There's this pendulum that switches from having everything consolidated into a single system and then expanding the number of systems that you have, then bringing it back, consolidating more, especially with Bazaarvoice being private equity backed. For a long time, there's private equity plays of, hey, how do we consolidate vendors and save money there? But now there's this shift in understanding, and I've seen it in my time with Bazaarvoice, where the ERP is just becoming our general ledger. That's it. That's it. And so, yes, we are all spending a lot of money on a system to be a general ledger, but the major ERPs just are not innovating at the speed in which these other players like Tesorio are. And so specialized tools and systems are driving AI innovation faster. Like I said, when we were doing this research about a year and a half ago and found Tesorio, we also talked to our existing ERP provider to see what was on their roadmap in general, what they were experimenting with AI, what was on their roadmap for collections, and it was not inspiring whatsoever. There was no commitment. It was just slow. We saw no benefit coming there. So specialized tools are just innovating and adopting AI. But one other important factor that people need to consider with specialized tools is that it puts the power of administering the tool in the business process owner's hands. So your leaders of these specific functions that these tools work for become your power users, your admins. So you can rely less on your biz tech team to do just minor updates. And so the biz tech team is helping you vet the tools, of course, and they set up the integration pipes with your ERP. And that gets to the underlying principle we've been talking about having good data. So yeah, you're sending across good data, but then it's on the subject matter experts to build out and ultimately own the tool. So my accounts receivable and collections leader, he's now the power admin of Tesorio. And I'm also in the middle of switching from a well-established commissions tool to a newer player because the legacy tool, again, is not innovating. And if we want to bring in new fields from our CRM system, we have to go and work with them, get in their queue or execute an SOW, and pay more money for changes that, on the other hand, with Tesorio, my collections leader can just go and make. So, and Carlos, I haven't told you this example, but it's so amazing from last week is my leaders and I were meeting with our counterparts in sales to go through some areas of opportunity that sales identified for finance to help sellers be more efficient. And there was an ask to say, hey, instead of looping us in on day X of collections notices, can you make it day Y? And we said, sure, makes sense. We get it. And there was commitment. The CRO was on the call. He's like, hey, we promise if you delay it by 15 days, we're going to be on top of that notice. And we moved on to other topics. But before the meeting had ended, my collections leader came back to everyone in the group and said, hey, that follow-up to do you had, I already made the changes into Tesorio. So you can
Oh,
cross
wow.
that off. And now the sellers are now looped in on that 15 days later notice instead of the one earlier. And that to me was just such a powerful moment, because if we had been still running our dunning out of our ERP, we would have had to put a ticket in with our business applications group. I would have had to prioritize it amongst other tickets in my backlog. It would have required custom scripting. And then, maybe a couple months later, I could go back and tell sales, hey, good news, we did that for you. But instead, the CRO and his leaders who had an org meeting the next day were like, great, we have a quick win we can already take back to our organization. And so that, to me, so besides the innovation in AI, the beauty and the thing I'm clearly passionate about is putting more power in your super users' hands. And for all the other people thinking about internal controls, obviously you lock down who has the ability to do what, but still, that is the power. And so, Brian, I completely see it's the extrapolation of tools. ERPs don't do it for you. It's old. They're the dinosaurs. Dinosaurs are cool, but not when it comes to systems.
Yeah,
So,
that's great. Well, yeah, Katie,
yeah.
the key thing that what you mentioned is, I think with ERPs, there's been a lot of wishing over the years. And probably everyone on the line here has at one time said, boy, I wish the ERP could do this. And either it couldn't do it, or the answer was, yeah, we can make that happen in about a year. But again, the point solution today is the speed of change and the speed to be able to innovate and stay up with the business and have the tool be able to quickly change as well is super powerful. And then Carlos, I expect you probably see and hear that on a daily basis, right?
Yeah, it's funny when I hear about this stuff. There's a couple of reference points. I won't name names, but like some of the big ERPs that we all use have been acquired for a lot of billions of dollars. But then look at the billions of dollars of market cap that exist out there of tools that like multiples over the acquisition price of tools out there created to enhance that ERP, right? So like the point is like it's not just us saying it. These are real things that are necessary and valuable. And sometimes I wish that the ERPs would realize like what they do is really important, right? Like it's there's like a quote, that I grew up in New York, and someone, it was in a book I once read. It said like, people in New York never get rich; they just attain new levels of relative poverty. And I feel like with the ERPs, it's like, hey, what you do is really important, right? But there's this like thing that's been kind of whispered in the ears of CFOs for the last 25 30 years, like become strategic. What is the future of, like, hey, look, without the ERP the business would like go under, right? Like we wouldn't know what's happening. If we can't do our books, we're screwed. Like we can't get audits, like we couldn't go public. Like this is really important, focus on that instead of getting distracted by these other things. That's why it reminds me of that quote, right? Like it's like everyone always wants more. But the fact is, at least with the types of things we're talking about and everything related to finance operations, these workflows, like cash can't wait. It just kind of flows, So like what Katie's talking about, imagine she took a quarter to make this update. Thanks for that. I'm obviously going to hit you up later, Katie, for that story. But riffing on that right now, like imagine that did take a quarter, right? And like that whole CRO organization had to wait an extra quarter to have an impact on DSO, like working capital getting improved a quarter earlier. If you're a big company, like that matters, right? And so can you wait on these things? No. And so like, should you tolerate relying on systems that require custom scripting and all of that? No. And the fact is, I think one of the biggest impacts of AI is that they changed our expectations. We expect things to just work, and we expect things to be end to end, like out of sight, out of mind, right? Like I don't want to have to step in there. Give me a heads up if there's an exception. I can step in and unblock you, Mr. and Mrs. Agent or whatever it's going to be, But like I don't I don't want to worry about anything. And so people's expectations, again, end-to-end solution, it's just got to work. I don't want to have to spend hours figuring out how to set it up. And with something as important as your financial operations, which all of it touches cash flow in, out, and whatever, this is one of the places where I think you're going to see finance moving fastest. So that's where I don't know. That's what I'm thinking.
And certainly cash inflow is the one that's you AI can really have the biggest impact, because the volume of information and the ability to analyze it at a speed that humans can't is so powerful. Like you say, I can improve my working capital by not being very good at accounts payable, right? I pay slow, but I can't speed up getting paid. That's the challenge, right?
Yeah. One of the most important words for machine learning is heterogeneity, right? And so you need randomness. Like if everything's predictable and consistent, okay, what's a machine going to learn, right? From a process, like a human can see it and figure it out. Like you just said, all right, put that check in the mail instead of sending an ACH. Duh. Okay, fine. You just got yourself 7 days afloat, right? But knowing when someone's going to pay you, like, just like, here's the irony of it all. Your AR is someone else's AP. So someone or some system out there knows exactly when you're going to get paid. Your job in AR is to extract that from the systems, from people's heads, from all that sort of stuff. And so that heterogeneity, I think, is what leads to, or that messy data or randomness, whatever you want to call it, unpredictability, is what leads to, I agree with you, where order to cash being a prime first suspect for AI and ML applications.
Absolutely. Yeah. And also, what's so powerful is when someone short pays or deducts, if I had that information already, I'd save so much time on investigating, right? That's powerful too.
Yeah. Agreed. I was going to pop open the Q&A here for a sec, see if something. Oh, Katie, you got a question for you. Oh, you answered it already.
Yeah, I definitely want to touch on data. I know we're closing in on the end of our session today, but we mentioned it a couple times. It's the fuel. It's got to be the right fuel. It's got to be clean fuel for everything to work. What are your thoughts on this topic, Carlos, when it comes to data, master data? We're seeing a big focus on this with all organizations.
So tell me more about what you're seeing. I'm actually curious.
Well, what we're seeing is organizations are considering data to be an asset. They're really, this is some recent information. We just produced a report looking at software in the space of master data management. One of the analysis that we did in our data is looking at organizations with low data standards. So they don't have the discipline around data governance, master data management. They don't have tools. First of all, they don't have the policies and processes in place. Then obviously the tools enhance that. What we see here, we looked at the cost of the finance organization and the levels of staffing in the finance organization. And there's a stark difference here in the range of 45 to 50% lower costs and lower staffing for organizations who are managing their data well. They have high data standards. I mean, it's pervasive through the organization. You think how from just creating the data to be able to take a customer order, data to be able to place orders with suppliers, and then that goes into the transactional processes, right? Executing on that. And then most important is, we've been talking a lot today, is being able to analyze and understand and predict. Well, if the data is dirty from the beginning, the transactions are bad. I mean, you throw your hands up and say, I don't know how to predict. I don't know what this report is really telling me. So that's definitely something I'm seeing there. And maybe let's do this polling question quick to get an idea of everyone on the line here. What is their organization's primary source of truth for financial data? And again, we may find that hopefully there's some source of truth. So there's choices here that we have, whether it's your ERP, your CRM. Are you doing it in databases created within spreadsheets? Maybe you do have a data lake, a warehouse, and hopefully you're managing it well, but possibly you don't have a single source of truth. So just let's give everyone a second to see this. But we're definitely seeing that organizations are realizing if they really want to get the full benefit of AI infused technology, they've got to have good data coming into it. Lots of data and also clean data.
Yeah, I think the next major unlock is going to be, people talk a lot about machine to machine interaction.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Like pretty soon here, like imagine each API having an agent, right? And like a standardized way for the APIs to be, if you want to query information from one data source to another, having the agent from one API call that information from the agent of another API, right? You won't have to be as specific in certain cases. Other cases, you will just need a good old like API integration. But I think that's going to be a big unlock and create a lot of interoperability.
Yeah. So Marilla, how's this one looking? This polling question. All right,
Sharing now.
ERP. Yep. And again, that's pretty common what we're seeing. Again, that ERP is as Katie said earlier. I mean, it's kind of it's your general ledger, but it's where all the data is sitting. But the way I get my work done, how I execute things like, order to cash, purchase to pay, is in other systems. And once I've completed that transaction, or I've run that report or analysis, then it just goes back and sits in the ERP. Yeah.
Yep. That's what I was saying before. It's pretty important. Like,
yes.
Focus on that, instead of some of these other things. There's plenty of other people who can move faster.
Yeah, well, I want to touch a little bit on people here and get your thoughts on this. Again, going back to what we see in our key issues. Lacking critical skills is on the top list of transformation challenges, and resistance to change. So, that's a big area of opportunity for organizations, regardless of how you're trying to evolve, is do you have a change management approach? Those things are at the top of the list. Katie, let me ask you a little bit about when you reflect on the people aspect of what you've been able to do at Bazaarvoice. Just some thoughts there.
Yeah, sorry, I was laughing. I'm not surprised to see resistance to change called out under challenges for finance organizations. And I want to reiterate, like, just my personal stance, I guess, is my soapbox. People underpin everything. You have to have a great team to support great technology. You have to have a great technology to support a great team. And so on my personal list, I would have had up leveling talent higher than number 11. And the biggest thing that's changed and the skill set change is number 5. You need to have people who are not afraid of change. We are actively interviewing. When we interview for people, we are assessing competencies for adaptability and flexibility. And it's called out here. For those of us with accounting backgrounds, that's not exactly the skill set that comes to mind, which is why we are actively including that in our competencies that we're looking for. Also, especially on the operations side, you need people who understand process and can think at that higher level in that end-to-end way. I know some wonderful accountants that are great at their job. They will get you through the audit. That's great. That's what we want them to do. But they can't flex onto the operational side because kind of stepping back and seeing that bigger picture, that proverbial forest through the trees is hard for them. And that's not to take anything away from them. They're, like I said, they're great accountants, but for operations, you need that process, that bigger picture. So adaptability, flexibility, openness to change, embracing change. And we saw it, Carlos, with adopting Tesorio. We have our collections team, and the ones who were most successful were the ones who got on board fastest. You're like, okay, I'm trying to think through how can this tool help me and make me better at my job. So eventually the team came around, but the early adopters had the most success and fastest. The last thing I'll say is, data. You need strong analytical skills. You need to, but more importantly, you need to be able not to just interpret data, but build stories and give direction from the data. Otherwise, it's just numbers. Our CIO has a great objective for her org that we have adopted in finance, which is data is a way of doing business. And so we have adopted that, and I expect that from my team as well. So those are the big skill set shifts that I've seen over the last several years.
Yeah, that makes sense. And again, the roles and the titles are changing. They're becoming more aligned to what you're actually doing, right? A data entry clerk is evolving to, analysts and scientists, and It's more about innovating and solving problems than just doing transactions, right?
Right. We're having systems do transactions. So now a lot of people's jobs are being up leveled and giving them more time to do the strategic thinking, the bigger thinking instead of, hands on the keyboard per se.
Yeah, well, I want to make sure we ask this last question. I know we're at time. I appreciate everyone staying on. If you want to learn more about the technology that was talked about today, about Tesorio, please let us know and we'll follow up with you. So we'll capture this. We won't share this one, but we'll follow up. So if you're interested, please do that. There is another question in here that I'm going to follow up after the session about Databricks in SAP. So I'll follow up, Richard, with you. But I want to thank everyone for being on today. Certainly thank you, Katie and Carlos. Great conversation, really insightful. I look forward to doing this again with you in the future. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Just leaving the poll open for a while, Brian, because there's a lot of movement on it.
Okay, terrific. And again, everyone who wants CPE credit, please, when you close out of the webcast,